Good evening and welcome back. Tonight we're stepping into the world of Petra's empty halls.
Of Petra's empty halls. We begin where the rose-colored cliffs meet silence. There, at the edge of the Jordanian desert, where sand remembers oceans and rock remembers rain, stands a city that was never built but carved. Petra, the place where stone learned to hold breath. The Nabataeans did not construct their capital. They revealed it, chiseling away what was not temple, what was not tomb, what was not the sacred geometry hidden within the sandstone waiting since the mountains first rose from ancient seas. It is said that you enter Petra through the sick, a narrow gorge where walls rise 300 feet on either side, where the path twists through geological time, through strata of red and ochre and rose, each layer a chapter in a story written long before language. The passage narrows until you walk in shadow, until the sky becomes a ribbon of blue overhead, until you forget the world you came from. And then the walls part like a curtain, and the treasury appears. Al-Khazne, they call it now, the treasury. But it held no treasure. The facade rises like frozen music, like a symphony carved in stone. 2 stories of columns and pediments, of urns and eagles, of figures neither fully human nor entirely divine. The Nabataeans carved it sometime in the 1st century, chiseling downward from the cliff top, removing what was not beauty until only beauty remained. Each column is a prayer translated into matter. Each archway is a question carved where answers used to stand. The rose-pink sandstone shifts with the light. At dawn, it glows like embers. At noon, it bleaches to bone. At dusk, it deepens to wine and blood and the color of dreams half remembered. Archaeologists entered the treasury expecting gold, expecting the spoils of a merchant kingdom that grew rich on frankincense and myrrh, on silk and spices carried between Rome and distant Arabia. They found only dust, only the imprint of something sacred, something removed before the city fell still, before the caravans stopped coming, before the water ceased to flow through channels carved with impossible precision into living rock. Perhaps the treasure was never material. Whispers tell us that the Nabataeans understood something we have forgotten, that stone is not inert, but patient, not dead, but sleeping, not solid, but permeable to those who know the proper words. They carved their tombs not as endings, but as passages, as doorways into becoming. Walk through Petra's necropolis, and you will see hundreds of facades, each one different, each one the face a family chose to show eternity. Some are simple, rectangular openings into darkness. Others are elaborate as palaces, with stairs and columns and rooms that branch like the chambers of a heart. The tombs say, death is not an ending but a translation, a movement from flesh to stone, from breath to echo. Inside these chambers, where shadows pool like water and silence has weight, archaeologists have found burial niches carved into walls, loculi where bodies once rested wrapped in linen and intention. But most are empty now, disturbed by tomb robbers or time or something else, something that left no record of its passing. What remains is the architecture itself, the precision of the cuts, the symmetry of the spaces, the way light enters at certain hours to illuminate specific walls, as if the builders understood that illumination itself was a kind of scripture. Beneath the known pathways lie sealed chambers. Ground-penetrating radar has whispered of hollow spaces, of rooms that breathe in darkness beneath the city's foundations, beneath the tourist routes and the documented facades. There are doorways that have never opened to modern light, portals carved and then deliberately closed, sealed with stone and sand, and the kind of finality that suggests not hiding, but consecration, not secrecy, but sanctity. What knowledge did the Nabataeans bury with their final breath? What did they place in those underground chambers before rolling the stones into place and walking away into history's fade? Some believe it was water that gave Petra life, and water that the Nabataeans mastered with an intimacy that bordered on the divine. Their channels still trace invisible rivers through the desert, aqueducts carved into cliff faces, cisterns hollowed from stone, dams that caught flash floods and transformed violence into sustenance. The engineering is so precise that modern hydrologists study it with something approaching reverence. In a landscape where rain is rumor and drought is law, the Nabataeans conjured a city that bloomed. For 6 centuries, Petra thrived. Merchants came from Damascus and Alexandria, from Mesopotamia and the shores of the Red Sea. Goods flowed through its markets like water through its channels. Precious resins, purple dyes, exotic animals, ideas wrapped in languages both living and lost. The Nabataeans grew wealthy, yes, but they also grew cosmopolitan, absorbing gods and architectural styles, weaving Greek columns with Egyptian motifs, Roman engineering with Arabian aesthetics, creating something that belonged to no single culture but to the crossroads itself. And then the crossroads shifted. Trade routes moved north, Rome fell, new powers rose and fell like tides that no longer reached this desert shore. By the 7th century, Petra was already fading, already becoming legend. Crusaders passed through and called it haunted. Bedouins sheltered in its tombs and told stories of jinn who lived in the stone. And slowly, almost tenderly, the desert began to reclaim its own. Sand filling streets, wind erasing inscriptions, silence replacing the voices that once echoed through colonnaded markets and sacred high places. In the moonlight, when tourists fade like ghosts, the facades seem to pulse with memory. Stand before the Treasury after dark, if you can, if the guards allow it, if the moon is bright enough to silver the sandstone, and you will feel it. Not sound, not quite. Something deeper than hearing. A vibration in the stone itself, as if the rock retained some impression of the chisels that shaped it, some cellular memory of the hands that touched it, the prayers that consecrated it, the ceremonies that unfolded in its shadow. The walls seemed to breathe. The empty doorways seemed to listen. Perhaps the voices never left. Perhaps they only learned to speak in frequencies we've forgotten how to hear. The Nabataeans had a language, of course, a script descended from Aramaic, words we can still read carved into stone. Dedications to gods, boundary markers, funeral inscriptions. But beneath the written language lay another kind of speech, a dialogue conducted between stone and water, between light and shadow, between what can be seen and what must be sensed. They carved the treasury to face east, to catch the first light of dawn. They aligned their high places with celestial events. They understood that architecture itself was a form of prayer, that space could be shaped to invoke the sacred. What did the Nabataeans whisper to stone that made it yield such beauty? We can only guess. We can measure the angles and admire the craftsmanship. We can excavate the tombs and catalogue the pottery shards, the coins, the fragments of silk and bone. We can use ground-penetrating radar to map the hollow spaces and debate what lies sealed in darkness. But we cannot resurrect the language that made stone sing. We cannot unbury the wisdom that transformed a desert gorge into a capital of wonder. In forgotten corners of the earth, in places where silence has substance and antiquity has weight, you can sometimes feel the presence of knowledge that survives not in books or monuments, but in the land itself, in the arrangement of stones, in the way light moves through empty doorways. Petra is such a place. It offers not answers, but the sacred weight of questions that have no end. At night, when the stars emerge like ancient witnesses, the city seems to remember itself. The Treasury's facade sharpens in moonlight. The tombs exhale cool air that smells of centuries and stone. The water channels hum with phantom rivers. And somewhere, in sealed chambers beneath the tourist paths, in hollow spaces that have held their breath for 2,000 years, the Nabataeans' final secrets wait, patient as sandstone, silent as prayer, guarded not by locks, but by the simple passage of time and the vast indifference of the desert that, having given Petra life, has now reclaimed it for the realm of dreams and whispers, where all lost cities ultimately return. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, this final knowledge. Perhaps it waits still, listening in the darkness, for those who come not with tools and questions, but with silence and surrender, ready to hear the stone voices speaking in frequencies older than language, older than memory, older than the mountains themselves, speaking still in Petra's empty halls, where beauty and mystery have become indistinguishable, where the passage through stone continues forever, and where the city that was carved from living rock still lives in ways we can feel but never fully translate into words. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and in the spaces between heartbeats, in the quiet before sleep, when the mind releases its grip on certainty and opens to the ancient and the inexplicable, we can almost hear them, the stone voices of Petra, singing still, in halls that are empty only to those who do not know how to hear.